Hi math students. Today we are going to do a review on how to convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. The reason why this is important is because we're starting to work with rational numbers, and in order to determine if a number is rational, or in order to know how to plot it on a number line, we sometimes need to convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. So on this document that I have here today, it shows at the top of the page a triangle. And in order to convert from a fraction to a decimal, we just follow the side of the triangle down so that we can see exactly what steps we have to do. So here along the left side of the triangle, to go from a fraction to a decimal, it says divide the numerator by the denominator. If we're going from a fraction to a percent, we would first convert from a fraction to a decimal, and then we would divide that decimal by 100. Similarly, if we're going from a percent to a fraction, we would follow the red arrow, and we would put a percentage over a denominator of 100 and simplify. We can go from a percent to a decimal and back to a fraction. So we can do all of these by following the triangle, and once you get a little bit more familiar with it, you'll find that there's actually some shortcuts as well. So I'm going to go through several examples on this page so that you have a little bit of review and practice on how to convert between these three things. So the first problem says that you have a fraction of 1/2, and we're going to convert that to a decimal and to a percent. So when we're looking at a fraction to a decimal, it says to divide the numerator by the denominator. Another way to think of it, however, since we know that our decimals are all base 10, if we can rewrite this fraction as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 10 or 100 or 1000, we can go directly to that decimal. Here's what I mean. We have the fraction of 1/2, and we know that our place value system is all base 10. So if we know that we can rewrite this as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 10 easily, we can go ahead and do that. I know that we multiply 2 times 5 to get 10, and equivalent fractions, whatever you do to the denominator, you do the same thing to the numerator. 1 times 5 is 5. So we have here a fraction of 5/10. Now I am reading a fraction, but I'm also saying the decimal as well. 5/10, that means that in the tenths place, which is the place immediately to the right of the decimal, we have 5. Of course, we'll always want to include our leading 0. So 1/2 can easily be converted to a decimal by writing it as an equivalent fraction first. If you weren't clear, or if you weren't sure if this could be written as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 10 or 100 or 1000, then you can follow the directions on the sheet, which is divide the numerator by the denominator. Remember, the numerator is the number on top, the denominator is the number on bottom. So we would divide the numerator by the denominator, which is 1 divided by 2. 2 does not go into 1, so I need to extend this dividend, so I'll put a decimal place after the 1 and a 0. Now I have a decimal, so I'll go ahead and bring up my decimal. Remember, it goes directly above where it is in the dividend, and I will look at this as 10 divided by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10, so we'll subtract. There is no leftover. We got the exact same answer by doing this two different ways. So 1/2 is still equivalent to 0.5 or 5/10. Now to go from either the fraction or the decimal to the percent, if we go from a decimal to a percent, we're going to divide by 100. 0.5 divided by 100. Remember that division means that this number is going to get smaller, and if we're going to get smaller, the decimal needs to shift to the right. And when we divide by 100, that is a shift of 2 decimal places. So we take 0.5, we shift that decimal 2 places to the right, and since we bounced past nothing, we'll put a 0 in that nothing spot, and that was 50. percent. Another way to think about converting from the fraction to the percent is to first think about what that fraction is equivalent to with a denominator of 100, because percent literally means out of 100. So if we start with 1/2 and we find an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, that will tell us the percent. I know that we multiply 2 times 50 to get 100. I would do the same thing to the numerator. 1 times 50 is 50. This is a fraction, 50 out of 100, and since percent means out of 100, the number 50 is the percent. The next fraction that we're given is 3/4, and we need to convert this both to a decimal and a percent. Whenever you can see that the denominator goes into 100 evenly, that's a good place to start since the percent is out of 100. So these don't have to go from first a fraction to a decimal and then to a percent. You can go in any order. So we have 3/4, and I know that 4 goes into 100 evenly, so I'll go directly there. 4, I'm thinking of quarters, 4 times 25 is equal to 100. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 3 times 25 is 75. This is 75 100ths, can also be written as 75 out of 100, and that's exactly what percent means, out of 100. So this is 75%. Now as far as the decimal goes, I'm reading this fraction 75 100ths, and I can just write that in decimal notation. I know that we have no whole numbers. I know that 100ths is 2 places to the right of the decimal. 75 is a 2-digit number, so I just simply put the 7 and the 5 in the correct places, and our decimal is 0.75 or 75 100ths. Okay, we'll do 2 more examples because they start with a different type of number. So the next one, they're giving us a decimal of 6/10. When you read that decimal correctly, you are already saying the fraction. 6/10 in decimal notation is 6/10, or also 6/10 as a fraction. And to write this as a percent, we can just rewrite the fraction with a denominator of 100. 10 times 10 is 100, so I'll do the same thing to the top. 6 times 10 is 60. Now we have 60 100ths, or 60 out of 100. Same thing as 60%, because percent means out of 100. For this last example, we're given the percent 80%. Since percent means out of 100, this is the same thing as saying 80 out of 100. There is our fraction. Of course, we can simplify them. Whenever we can simplify, we should. So I can see that these are both clearly divisible by 10 because they both end in 0. So I can start by dividing by 10, which is the same as crossing off a 0 on the end. That gives us 8/10. Since they're both even numbers, they can still further be simplified, I know, by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So simplified, this fraction is 4/5. Now for a decimal, it'd probably be easiest to go from 8/10 to our decimal because our decimal system is all base 10. Since this is already a denominator of 10, I can just rewrite it 8/10 in decimal notation. I have no whole numbers, so I'll start with my leading 0. I know that this is 8/10, so my number will extend to the 10ths place, which is just the first place to the right of the decimal. And since 8 is just a 1-digit number, I'll just plop that 8 right there. And we have 0.8, or 8/10. So now I would like to challenge you to complete the rest of the page and then check your work with the answer key that's provided.